All right, I'm going to get started just because we do have a pretty packed agenda. And if you didn't get my email, we did send an email out earlier this week saying that we extended this training until 4:30 because between Dan Constantine's presentation and mine, we wanted a little bit of extra time for questions. So we're going to get started. This is my presentation. I'll go first. And just a quick disclaimer, this training is sponsored by the Western Mass Public Health Association and the Franklin Hampshire Field Training Hub. This is not an official training of the Department of Public Health, Office of Local and Regional Health, or the Training Hub program. So for an agenda, we'll do introductions, definitions, exemptions, base of operations and servicing areas, application requirements and the inspection process, and resources and sample documents. And then we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of questions for my presentation, and then I'll hand it over to Dan. But to start, my name is Bree Dupris. I am the lead public health trainer for the new Franklin Hampshire Training Hub. It's part of the statewide Training Hub program. And prior to working at this, and also the Training Hub is out of the FRCOG in Greenfield, the Franklin Regional Council of Governments. Prior to that, I was the health director for the city of East Hampton. So a lot of the pictures in here and examples are going to be related to East Hampton, just so you'll know why I'm always referencing them. So I also asked Mark Carleo, who is the new central trainer for the Department of Public Health. He was the previous director of the Danvers Health Department. I asked him to just be present today in case there are any technical questions that I couldn't answer. So Mark, I don't know if you want to just do a quick introduction.
Sure. So I'm Mark Carleo. I'm the food safety trainer for the Mass Department of Public Health. I'm happy to be here, just hoping to learn something today.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'll try not to put you on the spot, but if someone stumps us with a question, I may reach out. I also have Liz Jacobson Carroll, who's our admin for the Franklin Hampshire Training Hub. She's going to be looking in the chat. So please put all of your questions in the chat, because if there are any we can't get to today, we are going to download the chat and we will get back to you with any questions that we can't answer. And then last but not least, Dan Constantine, if you want to give a quick introduction.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Constantine. I'm the Captain Fire Prevention Officer for the City of East Hampton. I've been the Fire Prevention Officer about 5 years, been on the job here about 26 years. So I'm excited to be here. And I just want to let you know I'm having problems with my video. It's freezing and jumping around, so I'll probably be popping my image in and out and stuff. So glad to be here.
Thank you. And real quickly, I'm gonna apologize. I'm probably gonna talk pretty fast today because I want to get through everything and give some time for questions. We are going to send all the slides out, and we'll also send a recording of this presentation, as well as any documents. We have some pre-operational checklists that we're going to send out and some sample applications as well. So there's a lot of information on these slides, but a lot of the information is captured in that pre-operational checklist. So feel free to not have to take notes. So most of you can probably tell, food trucks have become super popular among Americans in the last decade. According to the census, the number of food trucks operating has nearly doubled from 2013 to 2018. So I reached out to the my old admin in East Hampton and asked her if she could run some numbers. And East Hampton permitted 5 food trucks in 2015, and in 2022 permitted 21, which is a 320% increase. And then CPHS, which is the Cooperative Public Health Service out of the FRCOG, they permitted 6 food trucks in 2015, and in 2022 they permitted 13 food trucks. So it's no secret that these food trucks are gaining a lot of popularity. So permits are required whenever someone's going to either sell or give away food. And food is defined as a raw, cooked, or processed edible substance, ice, beverage, or ingredient used or intended for use or for sale in whole or in part for human consumption. So a lot of cities that I've worked for, there will be either an event coordinator, or we'll have someone who works for the city who does licensing, and they'll send out an email and they'll say, we're having this event in June. What does the health department need? What does the fire department need? I always tell them, send anybody who is going to do anything with food, whether it's prepackaged, prepared, whatever it may be, send them to me because it's way too hard to explain over an email exactly what is required for permitting. So I always have people come to me specifically because in 2018, the food code changed to no longer require a permit for the sale of prepackaged non-TCS foods. So spices, herbs, jams, jellies, chocolate candy, chips, things like that no longer needed a permit after 2018. However, some cities and towns passed local regulations at that time to continue to permit those types of foods. In East Hampton, we did, I believe some of our neighboring communities did, like Northampton. So just keep that in mind that you may have a local regulation that still permits those types of foods. So yes, for a permit, prepared foods, packaged TCS foods like yogurt, cheese, ice cream, no permits required for prepackaged non-TCS foods. So a mobile food establishment is defined as a food service operation permitted under the Retail Food Code that is operated from a movable, motor-driven or propelled vehicle, portable structure, or watercraft. So this is actually not defined in the food code. So if you look in the definitions of the food code, you're not going to find this. I don't know exactly why it's not in the food code, but the Food Protection Program does have a document on their website that defines this. So that's where I found this definition. And it's interesting because you're going to come across these situations. We had a situation recently, and I've had one before, where we had a pizza oven on a trailer, but then 90% of the rest of the setup was a temporary food setup. They had a tent, they had coolers, a hand wash thing, you know, there are 3 bins for wash, rinse, sanitize, and then they had a pizza oven on a trailer. So about 10% of their operation was actually a movable or portable structure, and they wanted to be considered a mobile food establishment. And it's tough because personally, I don't think that they would be. I think they'd be considered temporary food because only a tiny portion of their business is actually portable, but we'll kind of get to that later. And there are push carts, which are limited to non-TCS foods only, such as hot dogs. Most of the time I see hot dogs. Sometimes I've seen shaved ice before. And this is your typical push cart operation. So they should not be doing hamburgers on here, sausage, stuff like that, because those are TCS foods. So I know this is a food truck training, but I do want to touch on temporary food establishments because they do go hand in hand. So a temporary food establishment is defined as a food establishment that operates for a period of no more than 14 consecutive days in conjunction with a single event or celebration. So this is your typical setup. You've got the grill, a tent, coolers, hand wash sink setup. But technically per the food code, there's no such thing as a seasonal temporary food event. So the definition says for a period of no more than 14 consecutive days in conjunction with a single event or celebration. So think the Big E, the 3-County Fair. I mean, these are all out here in Western Mass, so I apologize. I know there's a lot of people on today that are not from out here, but these are events that are multi-day events. They can be issued a temporary food permit for no more than 14 days because it's in conjunction with a single event. However, if you were to have a vendor who's going to vend at, they're going to vend at a concert at the park on Friday, that's one permit. And then they're going to go to a different event on Saturday and Sunday. It's a craft fair at the same park. Technically, they should be getting another permit because those are 2 different events. So sometimes I do see, I'll get temporary food vendors that will kind of give me flack because they'll say, well, that town let me have a 6-month temporary food permit for $50, where, so, you know, they don't like having to pay every single time, but technically per the food code, we shouldn't be issuing the seasonal temporary food permits. Some exemptions: whole, uncut, fresh fruits and vegetables, honey, maple products, farm fresh eggs, and the prepackaged foods that are non-time temperature controlled for safety. So again, that can vary from town to town. Temporary food events are also nonprofit. Temporary food events are exempt from the allergy poster, the allergy notice on the menu and menu boards, the allergen awareness training, and food protection manager. I don't really love this. At the local level, you can put in a regulation that's stricter than the state code. So you could, I think the FERCOG might have a local regulation that still requires these items. But just keep in mind, if you do get an application from a nonprofit group, they may leave this part of the application blank. So just keep that in mind that they're not technically required. I also wanted to throw in bake sales. Bake sales do not require a permit if they're only offering non-TCS foods and they're prepared for sale or service at a function such as a religious or charitable organization's bake sale. And they also have to have a sign that says prepared in a kitchen that is not subject to regulation and inspection by the regulatory authority. So food trucks, on the other hand, can be issued a permit for a period of time, which shall be determined by the Board of Health. Every town I've ever worked in, we've always issued it for the calendar year. And the operator of a mobile food operation needs to get a permit in every town that they're going to operate in. A regional permit, I would love to see one someday, maybe with all of these PHEs that we're forming in these kind of regional areas, it's definitely possible. I don't know exactly how it would look, but I think it would be a great idea. And this is why, so the fact that these mobile food permits are annual, that's why I think that pizza oven example I gave earlier, they're like, oh, I'm not temporary food, I'm a mobile food truck, because they can get one permit for $100 or $200 rather than paying for the temporary food permit every single weekend. But that was a gray area for me. I didn't think that they were a food truck in that instance. So other exemptions for food trucks, it's pretty much the same as temporary food. But there is one other exemption, which is the home delivery of grocery orders like Instacart, DoorDash, all that kind of stuff. So base of operation. So for a temporary food operation, base of operation is not required if all food is prepared on site. So in East Hampton, they had an annual cookout with a cop, and the police officers would run to the store and get all of their food, and then they'd make hot dogs and hamburgers right then and there. So they didn't really need a base of operation because they were just bringing food from an approved source and then cooking it. If a vendor is selling a food that is prepared offsite, they need to include with an application a copy of their permit in whichever town they operate. So if you have a vendor who's making salsa or they're making some type of food offsite, they should be permitted in that town that they operate. So sometimes we'll get applications and they'll give me the church kitchen permit that they operate out of. That's great, but they should technically be permitted with that town as their own business. And I also like to get a copy of their label ahead of time if it's going to be a prepackaged food. And I always give them the link to the minimum labeling requirements, because there's nothing worse than being out on a Saturday when you already don't want to be working on your day off and you get to a temporary food event and there's absolutely no labeling and it's kind of put you in an awkward situation. So I try to give them all of the information there. I try to get all the information I need ahead of time so there's no surprises the day of. So the food code says that we may require a servicing area or base of operation with a food truck. I'm a firm believer that they need to have a base of operation because they should not be storing their food at their home. They should not be prepping at home, discharging their liquid and solid waste. Where are they putting that? Are they putting that into their septic system? So I'm a kind of a stickler on requiring that everybody has a base of operation. And in case you're unaware, a base of operation is an operating base location to which a mobile food establishment returns regularly for things such as vehicle and equipment cleaning, discharging liquid or solid waste, refilling water tanks and ice bins, and boarding food. The food trucks that utilize another commercial kitchen must be permitted in the city or town where the commercial kitchen is located. So I used Cousin's Maine Lobster because it's the only food truck I could think of that was somewhat famous, because I didn't want to use one that was from out here. And then I chose Applebee's in Greenfield because, again, it's a well-known place. So if you have Cousin's Maine Lobster and their base of operation is an Applebee's, when they come to me with a mobile food application, I don't want Applebee's permit. I want Cousin's Maine Lobster permit from the city of Greenfield. And the same goes for temporary food, which we talked about. And where this comes from is the food code says that anyone that leases or shares out their kitchen needs to be permitted as a leased commercial kitchen. So technically, Applebee's should also get a leased commercial kitchen permit. And that second bullet point that's in bold says each lessee of a leased commercial kitchen must obtain a retail or wholesale food permit from the Board of Health. Quickly on retail sales and wholesale, because this does come up sometimes. Retail sales require a local Board of Health permit. and it's defined as a sale to the ultimate consumer. So farmers market, temporary food events, online sales. Wholesale is sales to other than the ultimate consumer, and that requires a State Department of Public Health permit, which would be selling your items bulk to a grocery store. And the reason I think this is important is because sometimes we'll get vendors that come in and they'll say, you know, I'm going to use the church kitchen in your town. I want to make bread. It's like, okay, that's great. Who are like, is it wholesale or retail? Oh, we're only going to do wholesale, but we're going to go to farmers markets too. The second they say they're going to go to farmers markets too, they need to get a retail sales permit from you. Also, I'm just picking on Life Booch because they're from East Hampton. This is a screenshot from them selling online, and they are permitted, so I'm not getting them in trouble. But sometimes I'll see people selling their stuff online, and the second they do that, they also need a retail food permit. So just some quick comparisons. Temporary food, no base of operations is needed if food is prepared on site. Permit is required for each separate event, no more than 14 days, and nonprofits are exempt from allergen poster, allergen warning, and allergen training. Mobile food, base of operations is typically required. Permits can be issued for the year or any time period decided by the Board of Health, and they're driven or movable. So this is straight from the food code, what is required on an application and a plan review for a mobile food truck. You want their menu, anticipated volume of food to be stored, prepared, and sold. You want their layout, construction material, equipment types, so you can ask for their spec sheets of all of their equipment. Evidence that standard procedures that ensure compliance with the requirements of this code are being developed, and any other information. So required attachments, you want to ask for their certified food protection manager. Sometimes I will get the certified food protection handler. Just keep in mind the food code specifically says the manager, which is the 5-year certification, and I think handler is 3 years. If I come across someone who has the handler, I usually just tell them, listen, that's fine for this year, but next calendar year, you have to have the manager one. They should be giving you their allergen awareness certificate and the vomiting and diarrhea cleanup plan. So the same goes for food truck, just as it would for a food establishment. And if a base of operation is used, a copy of their permit from the city or town where they're located. And then just some best practices. I always ask for signed copies of the employee health reporting agreements. And the reason I put an asterisk next to this is because signed paper copies of an employee health reporting agreement is not actually required in the food code, but the food code does require employees to report to their supervisors when they have certain symptoms like jaundice, fever, vomiting. So I have always required them to sign off on that. I think it's just an extra layer of protection. So I do have an example of that at the end of the presentation as well. I always ask for photos of the truck, names and addresses of food sources, and a copy of the most recent inspection report. I just put optional because, again, that's not required in the food code, but you can ask them if their base of operation is not in your city or town, you can ask them for a copy of their most recent one. So inspection should take place before the first event, and that can be one of two ways. And I'm going to kind of get into why I like some ways and why I don't like some ways, but you can require the food truck to meet you during business hours, such as at the town hall. This grew on me a little bit. I didn't really like this at first, but it's the way East Hampton was doing it. So I grew to like it a little bit. There's some pros and cons to it, but I always require them to power their food truck on. I want to see their hot water and the refrigeration. And I always give them a pre-operational checklist because, again, we're not here to catch them off guard or to catch them, you know, doing something wrong. We want to make sure that they're prepared, and we want to give them a list of what we're going to be expecting. It makes it easier for the both of us. Pros of doing this is there's no surprises on the day of the event. Like I said, the worst thing is you go to an event on a Saturday. The food truck drove 2 hours to go to this event where they make a ton of money, and their refrigeration is too warm, their hot water doesn't work, the truck is leaking. There's all these issues, and you kind of have to tell them that they can't operate, and it's always kind of an uncomfortable situation. So you're able to vet the truck before the first event. It gives the owner some time to repair any, major issues before permitting them. The cons of this is you're unable to observe proper food handling, unable to observe refrigeration capacity when the refrigerators are fully stocked, it's 90 degrees out, you've got the stove on, They're opening up the refrigerator constantly, and you're unable to check food temps like hot and cold holding. So ideally, in a perfect world, the trucks would be inspected prior to and during an event. But full disclosure, I know that that can somewhat be unrealistic for most health departments, I'm sure. This is not something that we were always able to do in East Hampton, so no judgment. But maybe with the PHEs and the added staff throughout the state, hopefully that's something that we can get to someday. But I know a lot of us are just trying to keep our head above water. So all of these next couple slides are all taken off of my pre-operational checklist, so I will provide that at the end. But hand wash sinks are provided, water temperatures at least 100 degrees, soap, paper towels, and trash bin, and the employees must wash hands sign. Ware washing, 3-bay sink, sanitizer provided. They have the sanitizer testing strips. Physical facility, floor, walls, and ceilings are smooth, durable, non-absorbent, and good repair. So the truck should be weather tight. There should be no light seen coming through the ceiling. You know, they should have screens on all their windows, and there shouldn't be any, you know, huge gaps where rodents and insects can get in. Light bulbs are shielded or otherwise shatter resistant. Dry storage areas are clean, protected from dust and contamination. Food is up off the ground, and poisonous and toxic materials are labeled and stored properly. For the water tank and waste tank, it's kind of a lot, so I'm going to go through it somewhat quickly. We're going to go through a little bit of this in detail at the plumbing training that we have on June 8th, but essentially the water tank should be durable, smooth, and easily cleanable, fully enclosed. It should be slope to drain, which I find that a lot of our water tanks are pretty level. So you want to make sure that they're able to fully drain their water tanks. And the inlet shall be 3/4 inch or less. If a water tank has a vent, it shall be sloped downward and covered with a mesh screen. So this is just an example of a vent. If they have a vent, it should be sloped downward. Hoses used for drinking water shall be durable, corrosion resistant, and finished with a smooth interior surface. Hoses used for drinking water shall be durably identified if not permanently attached and not used for any other purpose. And backflow prevention is required for the tank, pump, and hoses. So the waste tank, they refer to sewage a lot in this section. And the first thing I thought when I heard sewage was, you know, human waste, like Title V sewage. But what they actually mean, it's defined in the food code as liquid waste containing animal or vegetable matter in suspension or solution, and may include liquids containing chemicals in solution. So in this particular presentation, when you hear me talking about sewage, I'm not talking about human waste. That kind of caught me off guard at first, but once I looked at the definition, it made a little bit more sense. So the sewage tank or the waste tank must be sized 15% larger than the water tank and sloped to a drain 1+ inch in diameter with a shutoff valve. A direct connection may not exist between waste tank and equipment in which food, equipment, or utensils are placed. If there's a grease trap, it must be accessible for cleaning, and sewage and other liquid waste shall be disposed of at an approved facility. So public sewage treatment plant or an individual sewage disposal system that is sized and operated according to law. These are some photos from a food truck that came to town hall and we inspected. I did not permit them that day. So clearly not kept very clean. Doesn't really look like they cleaned up from the last time that they used it. And just keep in mind that when you're doing these inspections, there shouldn't be food in the refrigerator or freezers. Again, all of their food should be stored back at their base of operation. I do find that sometimes they'll come and do an inspection. I'll say, oh, when's your next event? They'll say, oh, next week. Okay, well, why is the food still in your truck? It should all be back at the base of operation. So general probe thermometers available. Can they calibrate it? Gloves available. Unit is clean to sight and touch. Thermometers in all refrigerators and freezers. Refrigerators and freezers are able to maintain temperature. Equipment available for hot holding if applicable. And unit is constructed so food, beverage, and utensils are not exposed to insects, dust, or other contaminants. So again, these trucks are on the move. They're driving on the highway. They're driving on the road. So they should be very weather tight. So I'm a big postings person. I want all of their postings that are required to be up when I do the inspection. It makes it easier for everyone. They're not digging for stuff under the seat, in the glove box, in their backpack. They should have all of the postings up just the way a food establishment has to. So food protection manager and allergen awareness. They should have a copy of the most recent inspection form is available upon request sign. That's conspicuous for the public. So that doesn't mean like somewhere in the kitchen where no one can see it. That should be out where the public can see it. And then the allergen notice, which is before placing your order, please inform your server if a person in your party has a food allergy. So I made these when I was in East Hampton. I always bring them with me because, again, you're out on a Saturday doing an inspection. A lot of times these people end up just writing it on a piece of paper or a napkin and duct taping it to their food truck. So I like to bring these with me and just hand them to them. And then on the inspection report, I'll just say provided, on site by inspector. Postings continued. If they're going to have any foods that are served undercooked, like hamburgers and eggs, they have to have on their menu consuming raw or undercooked meats, poultry, seafood, shellfish, or eggs may increase your risk of foodborne illness. And all of those foods that they may serve undercooked or raw have to have an asterisk next to them. So just like this example here, you have the steak and the burgers have asterisks next to them. And then underneath you have that asterisk leading to that warning. Allergy poster is required to be posted in the food prep area. I have that on the next slide. So again, that's for the actual kitchen employees. That's not for the public. And then a copy of the vomiting and diarrhea cleanup plan is available for employees on site, and the signed copies of the employee healthcare policy. I put an asterisk next to that because, again, it's not actually required, but it's something that I've always required out of my health department. So I put this binder here because I always tell the food truck owners, just get a binder and put these things in it, because every year, literally every year, they're digging under their seat, they're trying to find this paper. I always tell them, put it in a binder and stow it away and you're good. They never do it, but I tell them every year. This is the allergy poster that is required for the kitchen workers. And this is my pre-op checklist that we will send out tomorrow. And then something we did in East Hampton, I stole this off their website this morning, actually. We post all of the food trucks that we permit on our website, and it makes it really nice for event planners and anybody that's going to invite a food truck to their brewery or whatever it may be. We always tell them, look at the list first. These food trucks are already good to go, because a lot of the time we'll find out on a Thursday or Friday afternoon that a food truck's going to be going to a brewery on Saturday. They're not permitted. We're all booked up. We don't have any inspectors available. So I really try to push people to utilize this list so that we're not having any of those surprises. So some of the sample documents are available they're actually available on our website right now, but we will also send them tomorrow. And then DPH has some good mobile food establishment information in the Q&A. And then the local Public Health Institute also has a good temporary food training for anyone who's interested. And then coming up on June 8th, we have a plumbing and food code training that is 3 to 4, and you can register here. It's also on our website. So again, we'll send this out. And then any questions? I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Yes, there are several questions. Hold on, things just changed for me here. There are several questions about, I'm so sorry, when you stopped screen sharing. Know what this, okay. There are several questions about ice cream. So I thought I would read them all out first, and then you can answer them as you'd like. So the first is, can prepackaged ice cream be sold at a push cart? Then, should prepackaged ice cream trucks have a base of operation? Is a towed ice cream trailer considered an ice cream mobile unit? Would they require Cori-Sori checks? And then, how do BOH handle the ice cream requirement for a town police permit as well as a BOH permit?
All right, I'll start with the push cart. So technically, I mean, it depends. I know some of the ice cream, like those kid ones, I think those are made more like they're not made with a dairy base. So that might be okay, but I think if they're gonna have any ice cream is technically a TCS food. So I think that, that I don't think they could use a push cart for that. And then somebody asked about the prepackaged ice cream trucks have a base of operation. I've been asked that too. I've had someone come to me. Again, it is technically up to the Board of Health, so you can make that decision on your own. My thing is I just don't like food being stored at people's houses. Residential kitchens or cottage food operations are limited to non-TCS food. So I don't like the idea of food being stored, TCS foods being stored at home. But Mark, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. But again, I think it's up to the town on that one.
Yeah, I had, in Danvers, I had an ice cream truck that was based out of a home. And it was something I inherited. But after doing the inspections and working with the owner, I didn't really have any particular concerns and continue to allow it.
Yeah, I think again, because the food code says you may require a base of operation. That's up to you at the end of the day. I know that's not a great answer. And then a towed ice cream trailer. Yes, that can be considered a mobile unit because the food code doesn't require it to be driven. So it just has to be a movable. And as long as majority of that operation is within that mobile unit, then yes. Like I said, I had that one operation where like 10% of it was mobile and then the rest was temporary. The Corey Sorry checks, that's probably a question for your police department. I don't think we have authority to look into that. But I know that doing that type of, I know typically food trucks or ice cream trucks have to be registered with the police department. I think that's all the ice cream.
I think so. Then there are a couple others that I'm going to group together. What about farmer's market? Operates once a week for 3 months, temporary? And
So I'm pretty sure there's a memo out there somewhere from food protection that says farmers markets can be issued seasonal permits. So farmers markets are an exception, so they can be issued, like we issue farmers markets permits, which are good for the full summer. So I know it kind of seems like it's just an exception that the state made for farmers markets.
can't we give anyone an annual or seasonal permit if they have a lot of temporary events they're doing throughout the year?
So it's my understanding if they fall under the temporary food definition, then they should be getting a permit for every single event 14 consecutive days or less. So if they're doing one day at a brewery on a Friday, and then they're doing one day at a different brewery on a Saturday, technically those are 2 separate permits, which I get is a pain. I don't love temporary food events in general because we have to send an inspector out, you know, as often as we can. And it is a lot. It's a lot of paperwork for us too. And it's not cost, you know, it's not good cost-wise for these vendors and for these establishments, but they're not meant to, well, in my opinion, I should say, and I've told temporary food vendors this, temporary food vendors are not meant to be, you know, operating every single weekend of the year, in my opinion. So I try to tell them they really should look into getting a food truck because we can issue those annual permits.
The town where they store all their trucks for the town, do they have to inspect all their trucks, or do the trucks get inspected at the town where they have their event?
So the trucks themselves will get inspected in every town that they operate in. But the base of operation is the responsibility of wherever that base is. So if a food truck wants to go to 10 different towns, they're gonna have to get 10 different mobile food truck permits. But wherever their base of operation is, so yeah, if the base of operation is in East Hampton and they have a bunch of food trucks, I don't have to inspect all those food trucks as well on behalf of the other towns, unless those food trucks are gonna also operate in East Hampton, of course.
What is the average temp food service fee?
Just speaking from experience, I typically see anywhere from like $40 to $60. Maybe a little, I mean, mine was 45. I see 50 a lot.
Do you have a model vomiting, diarrhea event cleanup plan?
I do, and we'll add that because I didn't originally add that. So thank you.
Can a mobile food truck store food on their truck in the refrigerators if the truck is plugged into their home? Or does all food need to be removed from the truck in a base of operation? Most people take their food trucks home.
It's my understanding that the food should be stored at their base of operation, if you require a base of operation, of course. Mark or Randy, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I've typically said no to that.
I don't think I have anything to add to that. It sounds like that would be kind of a local decision.
Yeah, we generally waive the fee for a situation like that.
For a multi-day festival, would you inspect every day?
Honestly, no. I mean, it depends on how long the festival is. I've only worked in communities where there's been, the longest I've done is a 3-day festival. I know that if anyone's on here from West Springfield, I'm sure they can tell you that for the Big E, they're there every single day, but that's a little bit bigger of a beast than anything else that I'm used to. But no, we'll typically go a few hours before the event starts while the food trucks are getting ready and stuff.
Would you give an ice cream truck permit without the police permit?
I would not, out of courtesy and to the police department.
How do
And
you handle-
I was just gonna say, same thing with opening a new restaurant. I wouldn't give my permit if plumbing, electrical, and building wasn't all set yet.
How do you handle food vendors that want to serve TCS foods out of a mobile setup, but not out of a food truck?
If it's not an actual truck, it doesn't actually drive, that's fine, as long, because you can have tow behind trailers, that's fine. I don't know if that's exactly what they mean. As long as it's, if it has everything it's supposed to need, hand wash sink, 3-bay sink, all that kind of stuff, then it doesn't have to be an actual truck. I mean, there's plenty of trailers that we permit as well.
Is a hawkers and peddlers required?
This question gets me every time. I really don't know. I've reached out to the state before. I've never gotten a clear answer from anyone. As far as I know, it's not required out of the health department. So it's one of those things where we have enough, as far as I know, I have enough to do that I'm not gonna, chase somebody for a permit that's not that's not my authority. That's a really good question though, if anybody has the answer. But I've reached out to the state before and I don't really get a clear answer, not food protection, Mark. I've looked up the hawkers and peddlers thing and I really don't know the answer to that.
You mentioned $40 to $60. Is that for up to 14 days?
Yeah, so one permit is good for 14 consecutive days with our fee schedule. So yeah, ours was $45. So if we had a 14-day event, then it would be good for all 14 days. But some towns do per day, but ours has always just been in conjunction with the actual definition of a temporary food event.
Thank you to those of you who have put some answers and your own practices in the chat. I'm not going to read those aloud, but you all could do that and the chat will be saved. Are there any other questions? Oh, somebody says there is a community that charges $450 for a 9-day event.
Yeah. The eastern part of the state, I've always done, whenever I've kind of tried to do fee schedule studies, it's always been for the western part of the state, to be honest with you. So I don't really know what happens east of Belchertown. So all right, well, thank you. I'm gonna turn it over to Dan.
All right. Go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me. All right, everybody see my screen okay? I have to watch my video too. If it starts going haywire, let me know. All right, so we're going to talk about food trucks and the fire code. All right, let's go here. So this is the fire department inspection. So when we inspect, we're operating under 527 CMR 1, which is the Massachusetts Comprehensive Fire Code. And under that, we're in chapter 50 and chapter 69 of that. And those two chapters also reference NFPA standards. So chapter 50 is your commercial cooking, which references NFPA 96. And then chapter 69 is your LP, I've heard of LP or propane, same thing, code, which is references NFPA 58 for the LP gas. So your chapter 50 commercial cooking, as far as a fire code, it doesn't matter if it's in a restaurant, brick and mortar, or if it's a mobile, it's pretty much the same code. There are some exceptions as usual here and there, very small nuances, but for the most part, it is all follows the same code. All right, so I'm hoping, oh, here we go. I shut off my video, sorry. This is what it does. All right. So the idea for this presentation is just for you to gain an awareness of what the components are of the fire service inspection. So you can be familiar with it and know kind of what we're looking for on our end. So it's just familiarization. And who knows, maybe when you're doing your inspection, you'll identify something that, well, maybe just doesn't look right. And, I think I'm going to send a picture to my fire official and, have him or her look at it and see what they think and stuff. Again, you're not obliged to, but if you see something like that, it might be a good idea to check it out. So this is just an awareness. So you're aware of kind of where we're coming from and what we're doing here. So there are kind of 4 major components when we do a inspection on a mobile food truck or food trailer. So we're going to be looking at the hood system. We're going to be looking at the LP system, so the propane system, the fire suppression system, and a little bit of generators. So we'll look at the generators too. And again, like Bree had said before, we talked about in East Hampton, we work together with public health and the health inspector, and we do the inspections together at City Hall. They're scheduled for those that want to come in for the year. We schedule them and we do the inspections together. Public health will not issue a permit until they're satisfied and fire satisfied, and vice versa too. I won't sign off on it until public health is all set on their end. All right, so we're going to jump right into it. There's going to be a lot of information in here. I apologize, but again, it's just an overview to give you an overview. So one of the things we're going to look at, we're going to talk about the LP system. So the propane system is on these trucks is the most hazardous part of the truck. It really is. And it's the part of the truck that has caused fatalities across the country past several years. So I'm very passionate about when I do my inspections, and especially dealing with gas and on these mobile units, to make sure that it's right. I really have zero tolerance when it comes to the LP systems. That's just the way it is, because they can pose an issue if they're not installed correctly and they're not taken care of correctly, and such. So we're going to find 2 types of tanks on these trucks. So the first one you're going to see is a DOT cylinder. So that's one type of tank. and you recognize the one probably on the screen there. It looks like your gas grill tank, and that's what it is. It's a 20-pound tank. So we're going to see 20-pound, we're going to see 30-pound, we're going to see 40-pound type tanks here. So we're going to inspect those. We're going to take a look at those. We're going to inspect them to make sure that they are not rusted. We're going to make sure, we're going to look for the manufacturer's date. When these are manufactured, they have 12 years from date of manufacture till the time that they need to be requalified and used. So anything outside of 12 years should not be filled by an approved LP place that fills these tanks until it gets requalified. And they're usually requalified for either 5, 7, or if it's a full hydro, 12 years on the tanks. And just as a little side note, so these smaller tanks have what's called an OPD. It's to prevent overfilling, and you have this little float here. And these tanks are only filled to 80% because of to leave room for expansion. So this little filler here will actually go level to 80 when it's filled to 80%. It'll actually shut the valve. So it's a device that prevents overfilling. So that's very handy. That's probably in the past 20 plus years, those have been in check. So we shouldn't see anything without those. Again, they got to go for requalification. So here's just an example of a tank. You can see on the top collar here, the 414. So that's the data manufacturer. So we're going to go ahead now. So this tank will be good until April of 26. And then it'll need to be requalified. So I look for that. I take pictures of that. I document that. The next type of tanks we're looking at ASME cylinders. So these are the tanks that are mounted underneath the vehicle. And as an inspector, I like these tanks better because they're permanently mounted. They're usually mounted by a professional. They're protected underneath, the valves are protected. And in case the vehicle was to get into an accident, they are very well protected. So these particular tanks, though, don't have like, shall we say, a shelf life on them. They don't have to be requalified after 12 years. It's basically like a visual type of inspection with these. They are made to a different type of specification. So what I'm looking for on these, quite simple, is, let's see here. I'm looking at the tanks. I'm looking to make sure that they're secured on the vehicle. I'm looking to make sure that the valves are protected around and such. I'm looking to make sure that they're not rusted. I had a recent inspection I did, and the tanks are just starting to get a little rusty. I told her that she needs to take care of that, and I want taken care of before next year. So that's one of the points with these ASME tanks, because they will get rusted, and they do need attention. So we're going to check the regulators on them, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, and then looking for any type of hose damage or anything like that. I'm going to go through and verify the ASME. The ASME tanks should have a plate on them, and I'll just verify that. So just some examples that you'll commonly see on the food trucks. You can see this is a 100-pound type tank. It's secured here very well and such. It's on a good mount. Again, the tanks are strapped in well. They're in the front, they're protected. And again, these are mounted very well. It's got a DOT type, and any of you, any RVers out there have campers, you notice those. So those are manufactured, this mount specifically for the 20-pound and the 30-pound tanks. Right, moving on. We've got some of the ASME tanks that are mounted in the vehicles. They're mounted underneath. This particular truck was built out in Buffalo. The gentleman had contacted the marshal who turned him to me, which was great because he reached out, say, hey, what does the state require? So we were back and forth several times. I helped him walk through some of the requirements So this truck was built properly. I always love to see a food truck when it's actually comes out of the factory as a food truck or a food trailer. You know, that's the best. Like anything else, you know, the fire code is still behind when it comes to the food trucks. We have come a long way in the past few years, but it was, again, the cart before the horse. This is what happens. The code usually comes out a little later because these things start to catch on. And the code is just not there yet. So we're still working on that. And here's an example of an ASME tank. It's brand new. All right, the next part that we look at is the propane regulator. So the propane regulator, we're going to look at that. There's all different types of regulators. The regulator takes the high pressure from the tank and it brings it down tremendously. So there's only a few pounds or even less, depending, going into the truck. So you got high pressure coming out of the tank. The regulator's job is to step that pressure down and keep it very low. So when we look at regulators, the main thing is we want a two-stage regulator. A lot of times I found that they have wrong regulators on these. They have single stage. And the problem with the single stage is if it fails, now you're going to get full tank pressure into the appliance, and you're going to have quite the blowtorch inside there, inside the appliance, which could cause, you know, some type of catastrophe, which we want to avoid. So the dual stage one has redundancy built into it. So if one stage fails, the other stage will take over, and such. So it's really important that they have the proper regulators. So that's one of the things that I look for, because it is the heart of the system, and such. Some pictures from the field, just so you know. So this is looking up underneath the truck. So that tire is up against the underneath of the floor. This particular regulator was installed. I had them turn it around because, as you can see on the bottom, this is a vent for the regulator, and that needs to be down. The one thing that makes propane hazardous inside any vehicle or any structure is that it's heavier than air. So it settles and it settles and it looks for a source of ignition. And as soon as it gets the right gas to air mixture, there would be ignition and a potential explosion. So these need to be outside. They need to be vented to the outside. Here's an example of a single stage regulator. Again, failed this truck. Come back, install the proper regulator, have it installed by a qualified individual. So these are really important to really know these parts for the fire inspector. Again, a single stage regulator. This was on a mobile home. It had to be dual stage, but I wanted to put that up there for another example. Again, I'll breeze through this. The piping is really important too. So the piping is huge. So the way that the piping should be run on a trailer or a truck is wherever the propane tanks are, if they're mounted, say, on the back bumper, or if they're mounted even on the tongue, okay, the pipe needs to go down and it needs to go underneath the trailer, and then it needs to come up near the appliance. And if there's any elbows or connections, they need to be made under the truck. So the idea with the piping is to minimize the amount of joints that are in the truck, because the truck or the trailer going down the road, especially in our New England weather and our New England roads, right, is jostling all over the place. And the joints in the pipe, where the pipes join together, that's where we're going to have leaks, and that's where there's going to be problems. So if we can minimize that, it's much better, and it's a higher safety factor. So that's why it's in the code, exactly for that. We also want to have flexibility. We don't want to have things hard piped right from the tank through the regulator to the other pipe. We need some type of flexibility. So whether that be a flexible copper line or an approved LP type of like rubber type hose, or high pressure hose that's made for LP, then that would work just fine. So that's really important. The regulator should be protected from the elements too, as far as, any road grime or anything like that. So the piping is huge, and it's obviously got to be, the piping's got to be a certain type of scheduled pipe. I won't get into that too much, but and it has to be secured, right? It makes sense. It has to be secured onto the vehicle, and so it's not moving anywhere and such. So the right piping underneath the trailer, minimize it in the truck or the trailer, so we can minimize the chance that the for a catastrophe. So, all right, some of the piping in the field. Again, nice examples of piping. This was a great job that was done. This was some repiping that had to be done. Again, another picture, just unacceptable. The other thing is, you notice this hose going through the floor too. If there's any hose going through some type of penetration, there needs to be some type of rub protection, right? Some grommet or something, so that doesn't chafe over time going down the road. So this hose came up and into to feed the system. So I had them change that on that particular one. So here's another example. Again, the piping came in the back of the truck, halfway up and across the back side of the grill. And as you can see, right in the middle there is a joint. So that could be an area where gas can leak. And when that gas leaks, it's going to go down and it's going to settle down and then it's going to accumulate. So we want to minimize these types of connections as much as we can inside the truck. And again, here's another one. I find that some of these are done by LP technicians. Some of them are done by plumbers. And I send them back and I send them references to the code. It's right in the code. It's really black and white, literally in the code that spells out about the piping. So some of this, I had him redo some of this because the piping had to go underneath. Like I said, don't mess around when it comes to the LP at all. Appliances are installed in the vehicle. Again, they need to be commercial appliances, right? I can't take my grill from Walmart and put it in the back of a trailer and start serving food out of it. No, that won't work. And such. I had somebody recently wanting to build a wood-fired pizza oven in a trailer and stuff. Sent me some specs, and I said, "Send me some specs." Turns out it was a residential type of application, and I said, "No." I'm going back to look at it, start with the manufacturer, and said, "No, it needs to be a commercial type of appliance that's rated for commercial." Appliances should be all under the hood too. They need to be under the hood. I know for those of you who have inspected these food trucks, they're all over the place. They are, but we really have to be, really do our due diligence with these folks. I work with them. If it's not something that's immediate, that I think can wait a little bit, then I might give them to the next season to do it. I've been trying to work with them over the past couple of years. I understand they need to get out there and they're trying to make a living and stuff, but I got to balance that with safety of them, for them and the public around them and the people working with them. Let's see. Caution plate. There needs to be a caution plate that's on the outside near the propane. So this is one of the things that I hadn't been pushing until this year. Again, I'm trying to work with these folks. So this is one of the things I said, okay, you've got to put this caution plate on. The caution plate is so that it's mounted near the propane tanks. So it's to remind them these 4 points to make sure that all the valves are closed before, all appliance valves are closed before opening the container valve, that the connection to the appliance regulating containers shall be, checked with soapy water periodically, and never use a match of flame to check for leaks. Container valve shall be closed when equipment is not in use. So that's the one thing that was my thing this year, is to get them all to put these caution plates up. I had been recommending the past few years because we hadn't required in the code for them to have gas detection in the vehicle. I had recommended for them to have a portable like gas sniffer. It looks like one of those long lighters you use to light the grill. To have one of those, they're $40–50. I had a couple buy them. I had one particular one buy it. It came, and when he came back, he said, "Yeah, I found 3 leaks in my truck, and I found 2 leaks at my restaurant. So thanks for." I said, "Well, it works. You've got to be diligent about checking for these things." I am very excited though that in the new revision of the code that came out in December for the fire code, that they are requiring gas detection now, permanent gas detection in there. So I am making them do that this year working with that. That's a step forward. All right, so commercial, let's go into the hoods. So if one is commercial cooking and creating grease-laden vapors, then they must cook under a type 1 hood. So that's what we're seeing in a lot of these food trucks is the type 1 hood. So when we talk about the hood, there's 3 components that we're looking at of the hood, just to break it down. So we've got the hood, which has the grease filters and the suppression system in them. You have the duct that goes from the hood and connects up to the third part, which is the blast fan. So these are the 3 components kind of that make up the type 1 hood. The hood, the duct work going up, and then the blast fan. And we're gonna talk about these different components. I also wanted to talk about just because I know we've got some temporary cooking under some of the pop-up tents, the easy ups and such. And a question always comes out for that. So if we have some type of temporary cooking, they're cooking under a pop-up tent, that's perfectly fine. Now, if they add a small little fryolator and they want to do frying under there, or they're cooking anything that has grease-laden vapors, what do we do? Because the code says it's got to be under a type 1 hood. Well, in NFPA 96, as far as the fire code goes, the AHJ, which is the authority having jurisdiction, and as I'm talking about that, I'm talking about, the fire chief or his or her designee, so that would be me in this case. The AHJ can waive that requirement for this temporary type of cooking under tents or outside. And they can waive that, and it's written right in the code if the AHJ feels that in doing that, it's not hindering any public safety, all right? So it's not putting anybody in danger. And so I myself in East Hampton, I allow that to happen. So what do I require them to have? I do require them to have a Class K type of extinguisher, which is made to put out grease fires. So I do require them to have that. But as long as when I go in there and I inspect it and I look around, if it's, it's out in the air, it's open, it's under a tent, the tent has to be flame retardant. That is one of the requirements too, but I allow that. So there is a provision in the code to allow that waiver of the having the suppression system and a type 1 hood in that type of setting. All right, so the hood, we look at the hood, we're going to look to see the hood must have a current inspection sticker from a licensed hood technician. And these licensed hood technicians, these are the folks who come and clean these hoods and inspect them. And they're licensed through the state fire marshal's office. And we keep a pretty tight watch on these between the fire inspectors and the state marshals, the compliance officers. We keep a tight look on these folks and such. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the sticker here, as you can see. So all these type 1 hoods have to have a sticker, period. All right. And so we look at the sticker, and if we're looking at this one, I'm looking to see, okay, it was last cleaned and inspected, let's see, April 10th of 2023. And this particular one, and it'll tell you how often it should be cleaned. Now that depends on what type of cooking they're doing. Now this one is stamped, and he didn't write it in, but it's 365 days. So every year, this particular hood needs to be inspected and tagged by a licensed hood person. Now, this particular hood is at a church, and typically churches are very low volume, so they're usually done yearly, as is some of the food trucks. Some of the food trucks are done yearly too because they're a seasonal type of operation. So that's what I'm looking at here. I'm looking to make sure, okay, we've got a signed sticker here, and there's this hood number. And it's within date. Some of the higher some of the cooking that's out there would be like that's creates a lot of grease would be like wok cooking, right? So your Chinese restaurants, and when you go in and see those, you've probably seen those. They're going to be a 90 or maybe a 60 day on theirs, and they have to be cleaned and inspected that often and such. So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the hood itself. We're going to look to see up in the hood. I'm going to look up with my flashlight Look to see the grease, the grease filters, going to look on the other side of the grease filters, make sure it's clean, that there's no grease buildup all the way up to the blast fan. And there's your grease filters. The grease filters need to be in place. Now, granted, sometimes when they come to inspection, they had taken them out because they go down the road. So those got to be in place. They all know that. There can't be any type of, these grease filters that you see here are the only ones that are approved. The ones that are mesh type, those are not approved for type 1 hoods. Type 2 hoods, different type of situation. Type 2 hoods do not have a suppression system, and they're mainly used to exhaust heat or steam. And I do have an example of one of those coming up. So I'm going to look at these and make sure that these grease, see, we got some grease buildup in here, over in here. I'm going to make sure that that these are nice and clean. So, and I'm going to take those off, and I'm going to look up in toward the blast fan and make sure everything's clean. I'm also going to make sure that we have good seals. I'll go into that a little bit. So again, suppression system, we want to look at the nozzles. We want to make sure that the nozzles are pointing at where they're supposed to, so that they're pointing at the flat top, they're pointing at the fryolator. They aren't pointing anywhere else. So they need to be pointed down to where the cooking is being done. So we look at that. The ducts. So the ducts, again, as we said, they connect the hood to the blast fan. So we're going to look at those. We're going to make sure that there's a nice liquid tight seal between the hood and the duct, and then the duct and the blast fan. Usually it's welded, or it's a liquid tight with a high temperature type of sealant and such. And I've got some pictures of these coming up here in a little bit. What's we got here? Oh, so fire protection. Talk a little bit about fire protection. So what do we look at for fire protection? We've got fixed fire protection, and we've got extinguishers, portable extinguishers. So we look at the fixed fire protection. The fire protection systems in a commercial hood are the wet chemical type, and they should be classified as UL 300. That was changed back in, I believe, 1994, where UL 300 came in, where the kind of a change was over from animal fat to vegetable fat. And also the fryolators nowadays a little bit more insulated. So they were creating more hot fires. So they needed a suppression system that would handle these hotter fires and cool them down. So they came up with this UL 300 system. These have to be inspected and tagged every 6 months. So twice a year, okay, these need to be tagged, and they should be tagged right near the pull station, okay, right here. And it's very easy to read. So this was July of 2022. This is an older picture. If it was nowadays, right now, right, that would be out of compliance because it's outside of 6 months and such. But you'll run into this often, to be honest with you, and they seem to think it's every year, or they forget, or what. So so these have to be within 6 months. These have to be tagged. What's also required when you're cooking with grease-laden vapors is that you have what's called a Class K, right? The silver fire extinguisher. So the Class K is specifically for grease-laden vapors for grease fires and such. So that should be nearby, and that's tagged every year. So the portable extinguishers, that one, and your ABC extinguisher here, which is your for ordinary combustibles and flammable liquids, they need to be tagged every year. And the red extinguisher here, is mainly on there for the generator. Sometimes they're carrying fuels, and it can be used for any type of Class A, wood, paper type of fire. All right, moving on. So just some samples of the field. So here's a good example. We've got the top of the hood here, over here. Oh yeah, over here, excuse me. And then we have the duct over here. And as you can see, there's quite the gap here. So this is unacceptable right here. This needs to be liquid tight, because now you're going to get grease building up in there. If you get heat and you get ignition, now you're going to have a fire up in there. So this needs to be fixed and welded all around here and liquid tight here. And as you can see, you got a glimpse of the suppression system inside too. So the nozzles for the suppression system are not only facing exterior and face down towards where the food cooking surface is, but it's also inside the duct. It's behind the grease filters up in there, and it's pointing up into the blast fan. So you have nozzles all up in there also protecting all of that area. So this one needs to be fixed, and this one did not pass, as you may have guessed. So over here, again, we need some work here. This silver tape here, you know, this duct tape, this silver duct tape that goes on like HVAC ducts. Yeah, that won't pass. That's not rated. So that won't work either. So this needs some work done here. This needs to be all liquid tight, so we can't get any grease or vapors up in there and such. So here's an example. So this fan here, this goes with, I believe the next picture. Yes, this one here. So this was a food truck that was purchased out of state and brought in for inspection. And unfortunately, they didn't consult with us first. This is the type 2 hood. And in this particular state, it wasn't required when cooking grease-laden vapors to have a suppression system. So this is non-compliant here. The fan itself, non-compliant. It's not an approved blast fan for a type 1 hood. And the hood itself is non-compliant. So they had to redo this whole system in here. And you know, we really have strived over the past several years between Bree and between Brian, our inspectors here, when Bree was here, is to really get the word out. And if people, you know, were looking to get food trucks and stuff, we always steer them with us, and they steer them in my direction, because I've helped a few people avoid, you know, buying some catastrophic trucks, some bad trucks that they would have to dump a lot of money into. So I've helped a lot of people, a few people in when they're picking out and looking at trucks. Always here to help them. And again, bad example here, right? We don't put aluminum foil, you know, all this dark area. This is looking up into a blast fan, aluminum foil, or maybe it's, you know, again, the duct tape over there. So we don't want that. So that's got to be fixed. That particular one, again, this particular one too has to be fixed. This needs to be welded up. You can't have these gaps in here and such. This was off a truck. I think it was last year, maybe in the year before. I'm sorry, it was the year before. He had a couple of the major things. I had asked him the year before to get it fixed. He didn't. When he came back, I failed him. He practically peeled out of the yard. He was upset at me. Oh, well, I heard back from about 3-4 weeks later, and he actually thanked me and said, wow, I can't believe the amount of ventilation now coming through there, my truck, after that was fixed, and such, and then had some other issues. So this is what we do, right? We don't always make friends doing this, but it's okay. It's all about keeping the public safe, keeping these folks safe, and that's what it's about, right? These folks are our customers, and this is we got to deliver a good product here. So, all right. Again, just an example here. We got now we got some welding done on this one, this particular one here. Needs a little cleaning still. That's okay. We're working on that. I got that cleaned. All right, and then just a little bit about generators. Again, generators are a source of ignition. They must be kept 10 feet from the openings to buildings. The fuel should be stored at least 10 feet away. They must be kept 10 feet from other food trucks. You know, the food trucks really should be 10 feet apart from each other. When they're set up, they shouldn't be near any openings and such. So that's really, really important. All right, I think that's what I have.
Dan, I can read a few questions for you if you're ready.
Sure, shoot me one at a time.
Sure, I will. And a few of them, I think maybe they were asked before you, and then you subsequently addressed the topic. So just say so and I'll read the next question. So the first is, can ASME tanks be located on the back of the vehicle?
So I'm assuming we're talking probably like the bumper or something in the vehicle. I would say no, they have to be mounted particularly underneath the vehicle. And there's a particular code that addresses that.
Would appliances that must be under the hood include equipment such as steam tables or rice cookers?
Steam tables and rice cookers do not technically need to be under the hood, no, because they wouldn't be creating any grease-laden vapors. May it be a good idea to be? Yeah, just to get the heat and the steam out, but required, not to my knowledge.
How often does a food truck hood need to be inspected, cleaned?
Yeah, very good question. So the answer is it depends. So it depends on the type of cooking. So when we talk about the like the wok cooking or the char broiling or the deep frying type thing, those are usually about, every 90 days on those. Now, when we're looking at that, we're talking about two restaurants that operate, pretty much daily and such. So you'll see a lot of the food trucks will have the yearly, the stickers will be yearly on them. It might be something to just, take notice of. It depends how much they used, but from what I have seen, the food trucks that I've come in have been pretty good about that, about doing their due diligence with that cleaning. But yeah, so it depends on the cleaning, and there's actually an NFPA 96. There's a guide for that and such that would help guide you to what type of cooking and how often it's required. Now, the hood folks really should be raising a flag upon this. Now, just to give you an example, I had one go back to a restaurant. So because a lot of you folks do restaurants, so I had a restaurant, and really, they were on a 6-month, and I wasn't happy with the 6-month. I think they needed to go to a 4-month. It had gone through. I told them to, I talked to the hood folks about it. Well, when I come back later on, the hood folks again still did the 6 months. So I called them out on it. I says, you need to change it to 4 months. That's it. I'm making the decision now. But they really should be the ones evaluating it when they come out to clean it and say, we really should go less on this, or you can go a little bit longer on that. So it's the folks who clean the hoods really should be helping to advise on that. But the inspector really needs to do due diligence and take notice of it, because he or she might need to step in and change that interval.
Can restaurant owners clean the grease filters between professional cleanings?
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes weekly. A lot of them do weekly. They'll clean them. That is absolutely fine. And I highly encourage that.
So someone here just had a conversation with the deputy fire chief today, and he is not allowing any cooking under pop-up tents. They are fire retardant for temporary food events. Is this something in the fire code or just determined by a local fire chief? I prefer to have overhead cover, overhead food prep areas, and tents are generally the easiest thing to put up. He stated it was something the state fire marshal's office recommended.
Yes, so so is it exactly in the fire code? I'd have to double check on that one. I believe, trying to search my memory here. So we require it. I believe as the AHJ, they can require it. Is it specific in the fire code? I believe it is, but I can't tell you definitively. But if the deputy, if the local AHJ is telling you you have to do that, then they have to do that. Absolutely.
Excellent. That's it for questions.
Well, I hope that you got something out of this this presentation, at least to give you a little bit more insight in where we are. I just want to put a little plug in too, is that this is a team effort, right? I'm going to get on my soapbox from it. This is a team effort, right? Public health, fire, building. I'm very fortunate. We work very well in East Hampton, the city I work with. It's a team effort. We're all in the same business, right? To make sure the public's safe. So it's important to really network and work with you. And depending where you are in the fire service in the Commonwealth, you're going to run into different levels of competency, and it's just the way it is. You have some smaller towns that it's only a part-time fire chief, and he or she does everything. and such. And then you're gonna have some bigger cities where they're very, very involved in it and stuff. So you're gonna see compliance kind of all over, enforcement kind of all over the place. That's unfortunately the nature of the beast. I'm trying to work in Western Mass to get us kind of all on the same page and doing trainings with the other fire inspectors and stuff. Please, if you have questions, work with you. Look to your AHJs, your fire inspectors, and you can always, Bree's got my contact information. More than happy to help you anytime. She's got my cell phone number. You should give that out, and more than happy to help any way I can.
Well, thank you, Dan. I thought that was super helpful for us to kind of keep an eye out when we're on our inspections. And that's always been helpful, kind of knowing, just scratching the surface of building code and fire code. Can't say that I know it in depth, but just knowing kind of some of the major things to look out for has always been helpful. So thank you. And I'm going to call I just had it up, the office that enforces the hawkers and peddlers tomorrow. And I will get back to everybody with a more definitive answer, because that is something that comes up a lot. And to be honest with you, it's always been hard to get a straight answer. So I want one as well. So we'll follow up tomorrow with all of the sample documents. I will add that vomiting template, and we'll go from there. And then if you have any questions in the meantime for Dan or I, please send them to me and I'll get them to Dan. So thanks. And we have our next training is June 8th on the plumbing code. So that information is on the second to last slide, I believe, of my presentation. So, and thank you, Mark, for being here, and sorry for putting you on the spot.
My pleasure, Bree. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
We'll see you
you.
later.